I've worked a fair few jobs over my lifetimes in different industries, and each time I've been lucky enough to be recognized as a top performer, even when I've had no previous experience. What I've learned from this is that when you start a new job, you don't need tons of experience and you don't need to know everything to stand out. What will help you much more is developing a set of transferable skills that I'm about to teach you that will help you excel in any industry. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a productivity and career expert, and I'm here to help you win at work without burning out. Today, I'm going to teach you how to go from anxious newbie to top performer at any job that you work now or in the future. Now, keep in mind, the tips that I share today are not only going to help you stand out, but will also help you maintain really good work-life balance and maintain good mental health. I will never ever tell you to just slave away and work long hours as a way to get ahead in your career, because I don't believe in that. The first skill is taking ownership. Throughout medicine and consulting, in every feedback chat that I had, this was a strength of mine that was always heavily praised. It's a skill that separates the people who are there just to take a paycheck home and get their work over and done with versus those who are actually invested in the outcomes and the success of their work. At its very core, taking ownership is sort of an attitude or a mindset. It is taking accountability for your work and knowing that it is up to you and essentially you alone to get it done and to get it done well. But with all that said, here are some practical things that you can do to show your manager that you are taking ownership or that you want to develop that ownership mindset. The first is closing the loop. So whenever your manager presents you a task, you not only accept the task as you should, but once you've done the task, you report back to your manager and you share any insights that you may have gleaned from completing that task and what next steps you propose from the insight that you learned from that task. So an example is, let's say your manager asks you to interview a client on a certain topic. You reach out to the client, you schedule a time for the interview, you prep the interview notes, and you might check your notes with your manager if you're not too sure about them, and then you conduct the interview. Once that's done, you then tell your manager, hey, I've just conducted the interview with this client and this is what I learned, and now I think that I should do this. Maybe put the interview notes on a slide or send out an email to the team summarizing what I learned from the interview. That's what closing the loop is. The second thing you can do is ask for help when you need it, but also present solutions with your challenges. So going back to the same example, let's say your manager has asked you to interview a client, but you've emailed the client and the client hasn't responded and it's been 2 days. You would raise that to your manager, but you might also say, would it be okay if I called them? Or would it be okay if you raise that at the next stand up with their superior so that they can sort of chase it down from the client side, as an example? And then your manager might say, yes, that's a great idea, let's do that. Or they might present another idea that they think is better, but it doesn't matter as long as you've shown that you've thought about it and you're thinking about it and you're actively thinking about it rather than sort of just expecting your manager to do all the thinking for you. Finally, moving the project forward at pace. This means getting the work done so that when your manager checks in, you're not exactly in the same spot as you were a day ago when they last checked in. But essentially, you should be responsible for moving your work forward and you should be going at an appropriate pace. Again, all of this underlined, if at any point you need help, you are allowed to ask for it. Taking ownership doesn't mean doing it alone, but it means that you know what you can do alone and you know where your limits are and you speak up when you have reached your limit. Another skill of mine that people really appreciated, especially in consulting, was resilience and a can-do attitude. Now, for me, this means basically being open to learning new things, trying different approaches, working with different people, and also getting up and having another go after setbacks. I think where I developed this resilience was probably much earlier, either in med school or when I used to run my own business, because I experienced a lot of setbacks. And I learned over time that the only way to get through those setbacks is to keep going. And setbacks are not a reflection of yourself or your capabilities, but more an experience to learn. And so in consulting, we would often get asked to do things over again because the partner, the manager, or the client had a different view or thought that it could be done better this way. Now, it's really easy for someone to just be like, oh, again, like, why do I have to do this again? Like, you said this and now you're saying this. Or the way I view it is like every time you're asked to do something again, or every time you're given a bit of feedback, it's actually getting you one step closer to the correct answer or the best outcome. And so really embracing those opportunities to have another go is a great way to keep learning, but also a great way to show your managers that you are willing to do what it takes to improve and do what it takes to do the best thing for the project, the team, the company. Number 3 is stating your boundaries often and early. Now, this may be a little counterintuitive because you might think that your managers don't really like it if you have boundaries and you're not just slaving away at work. The reason why it works is because when you state your boundaries and when your boundaries are respected, you can show up better at work. So for me, if anybody here has been watching my videos, you'll know that I love doing things and I have so many sort of priorities outside of work, which is gym, spending time with my family, my friends, and my partner. Those are so important to me. And whilst I am really ambitious and I want to do well in my career and work, I also want to enjoy my life. So whenever I started a new project, I would always say I love going to the gym in the morning, and that usually means that I prefer to sleep early. And so if there's any feedback, I would love to hear it earlier in the day rather than later. I like to switch off completely on the weekends. I like to have dinners at home with my parents or with my partner. I would always say that really early on. But what I would say with that is that I am willing to put in the work and I can work hard around those times. And people understood that. They understood that I would put in the work that is required so that I could get my work done and still enjoy those things. And by sharing that early, it meant that my manager was sort of on my side and would keep a lookout for me to ensure that I could get those things done. So for example, they would say at 5 p.m, oh, Sarah, it's 5, like maybe just finish this off, then you can go home and then maybe you can like have dinner with your partner or whatever. Or they would say to their superiors, like, can we get this feedback by 4 p.m. so Sarah can action it before she goes home, that sort of thing. And so the underlying message is, don't be afraid to set your boundaries. And if you are afraid, frame it so that your team knows that by honoring your boundaries, you can show up better at work, which is what ultimately you want to do. Finally, and this is something that I'm still working on, being able to influence others. Now, this doesn't mean being manipulative and just like scheming to get people to do what you want to do. It means being able to get others to be excited about and to believe in the work that you're doing so that they can play their role accordingly. I think one of the best examples of this was when I was in medicine. Now, doctors and nurses work as a team. As a doctor, I was often told things that needed to be done by the consultant or the big boss, and then I would have to then tell the nurses what needed to be done. And of course, there were some things that the nurses needed to do and some things that I needed to do. Of course, I could do the things that I needed to do, but I needed to be sure that the nurses did what they needed to do as well. Not because that they didn't want to or anything, but they're busy and they have competing priorities. So often what I would do is I would try to be useful to the nurses. I would help patients get water. I would help patients go to the bathroom. Basically anything that I could to make their life easier so that they would also want to help me in return because they had more free time. And then that way, I could then sort of make my boss a little happier because the things that he had asked us to do were done. Another example of this is in a consulting setting. Sometimes you need stuff from the clients, but it takes work for them to get it. They might need to prepare the data in some way or go out and collect the data. So to help my client want to help me, I might offer to help coach them so that they could present in front of the CEO in the next big meeting. Or, I could offer to walk through what I'm doing with the data so that they could then learn it for themselves and do it themselves next time. I don't think it's manipulative in any way, because at the end of the day, you're all trying to get to the best outcome, whether that's the best outcome for the patient, the best outcome for the client, the best outcome for your business. And so if you believe in what you're doing, so should others. It's just getting that message across. And so yeah, that's it. When you start a new job, you do not need to know everything. All you need to do is practice those 4 skills that I just shared with you, and you will be amazing. But yeah, that brings me to the end. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you did find it useful, please like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.